Hey guys, it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. Okay, so, hello, good morning. I actually have kind of a lot of questions today, so just one thing before we get started. I don't know if any of you, maybe some of you actually took me up on the erotic book club idea, but I'm going to continue doing it. So for March, it was Henry and June by Anais Nin. And for April, just letting you know early in case you want to get a jump on it. I don't know what kind of literature class I think I'm running here, but if you want to do your homework early, The Awakening by Kate Chopin. I'm assuming that's how it's pronounced. If I'm wrong, I'm deeply sorry to her and her family. The reason I picked this book is because it is cited as one of Anaïs's influences. This is one of the books that she read before she started doing her well, certainly before she published her diaries. So Kate's whole thing is that she was coming from the sort of Victorian idea that women did not have any sexuality, or actually the term that I used when I was reading about her is the anemic sexuality of the Victorian woman, which is that women were not supposed to have any sexual desires or urges, etc., etc. So this book, which is one of her only actual novels and which was widely banned and considered immoral, that's how you know it's good, right? So after this got so many bad reviews that she exclusively wrote short stories after this. But she wrote about women in New Orleans, which is where she lived, or definitely in Louisiana. I don't really know what the plot is yet. I know that it has something to do with the idea that women are motivated by sexual desires. Whoa, believe it or not. She seemed to have taken a stance against Darwin's concept that evolution is entirely the man's choice and that women are just are acting on like some innate need to reproduce, and she's kind of making the argument that, oh no, like we actually choose who we want to have sex with. I know, it's like very wild. So yeah, this is considered sort of one of the forerunners of feminist literature. I don't know how erotic it's going to be. I believe there is adultery in it. I don't know why it sounds like soup. I'm like, there's adultery. But anyway, we'll see how this goes. At some point, we'll have to read, after Henry and June, we're going to have to read The Tropic of Cancer, which was also very, very banned. Apparently, Henry Miller was just like, he actually said, like, fuck it, I'm going to write whatever I want. And that's a book we got to read. But anyway, The Awakening by Kate Chopin. Okay. Let's get into questions. How and when did you know that Mr. Blake was the person for you? As a person moving out of the honeymoon phase of being with someone who I think might be the person for me, just curious to know how you figured it all out. It's kind of hard for me to answer this question. I mean, I think it's hard for anyone to answer this question. I think this is where the when you know concept comes from. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what it felt like for me, because I was really young and really had never experienced anything like it. And I went through a lot of the beginning of my relationship just like very confused, expecting it to end at literally any moment. Like, just like if you could just take all the concepts of like being terrified and completely uncertain and not knowing what a good relationship was supposed to look like and not having any role models, I guess, at the time when I met Mr. Blake, I could not tell you that I had ever seen a healthy relationship. So this is something someone said to me once, that they were like, well, I don't know what a healthy relationship looks like, so I don't know how I'm going to have one. And that was me when I when I first met Mr. Blake. But just to give you a little bit of backstory, it's going to sound crazy, but I'm going to open with, I've had a handful of very psychic moments in my life. I don't know if I was actually psychic, but it's coincidental. I've made a handful of concrete, I'm going to use the word prophecy only because it seems like a cool word for me to use. So one of which was predicting my brother's birth. 2 revolved around Mr. Blake. So I got into and got a scholarship to the law school that I eventually went to, and then I got in very early. So law school admissions are rolling and they kind of take a while. Like they don't have like a definitive date. They just get back to you when they get back to you. And then later I got a call from the dean of a better law school that was in the Bay Area, and so at that point I had to decide which school I wanted to go to. And now looking back, there was no reason for me to have not gone to the better law school. The only thing was that I had this weird sense that something was waiting for me in Chicago, that someone was waiting for me in Chicago. I cannot explain this. I don't, I just can't. It was like one of the witchier moments in my life. I don't know. I'm not saying I have magical powers. I don't think that I do, but something innate told me I had to go to Chicago. So I did. And then after I met Mr. Blake, he had to get in touch with me because he had to reschedule our initial fitness assessment. He had some sort of event at the initial time we had scheduled, and so we had to push it like a couple of hours or something. And he had gotten my phone number through the gym and called me to be like, we have to reschedule. And then I called him back and couldn't reach him, and so the gym gave me his cell phone number. I'm explaining this only because I don't want you to think he was like this creepy man who just texted me. This was a whole like song and dance of me trying to get in contact with him. Finally, I text him. And normally when I'm texting someone one time, like say the person I'm having a fitness assessment with that I don't ever plan to see again, I would never save their number in my phone because why would I? There are plenty of people whose numbers I do not save in my phone. But I had his first name and I had his phone number and I put it in my phone and I had the weirdest sensation of his name popping up a lot on my cell phone screen. I just had this kind of weird, intangible, the same feeling that I knew I had to go to Chicago. I had the same feeling that I was going to see his name on my phone a lot. Yeah, and I don't know how to explain any of these things, but I honestly can't tell you that there was a time that I didn't know he was the one. It's like I knew he was the one before I met him, which is very weird. And yeah, I mean, I write like fantastical romance. You're gonna have to go with the idea that sometimes I am not like the most realistic person on earth, okay? You can take or leave that. I don't know how real that is. Building the actual relationship, that stuff I can really talk about. And the kind of how did I know he was the one, that sort of fits into the when you know, weird, mystical, maybe bullshit, maybe not of love. I will say that I can tell you the precise moment that we were no longer in the honeymoon phase. The relationship was like, pretty normal, I think. It progressed very quickly. I will say that it moved very quickly. We moved in together officially after 6 months, which I would not advise to anyone who was my age. I would never tell someone my age, hey, move in with your boyfriend after 6 months. But it was a thing that felt right at the time and I didn't question it. And that was the whole thing, is that I didn't question a lot of the things that were happening to me. Like, oh, I've had these weird psychic feelings about this guy I've just met. I don't know, it feels right, I'm going with it. I would say, I think it was a year and a half in, we had our first like test. So now I'm moving into actual relationship advice. I'm moving away from mysticism and into actual thought. I think that most relationships that I have observed have their first big conflict around a year and a half. And it has nothing to do with your I think the thing is, you and your significant other will have argued by then. You will have sort of an idea of like who they are and what their weaknesses are, and you forgive them those things because you love them. Probably, maybe. But it usually takes a little bit of time for something major to happen outside the two of you. So when you start to see things like how they react to panic or how they react to something bad happening, you start to uncover the weaknesses that are less about them when they're being their best self, which they usually are being for the beginning of the relationship, and more like, uh-oh, it's time. They've just tripped and fallen into their worst self. I mean, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here, but the first big fight that we ever had to do with some lingering things that were following from his relationship before me. So, it took a year and a half for the remnants to kind of pop up. I think we were dealing with my difficulties first. I had never been in a relationship longer than 30 days. So there was a lot of insecurity for me going in, not in myself, but more in like, we would fight and I would be convinced I'd never see him again. I'd never hear from him again, and that was just it. The feeling of I don't want him to go, I don't want him to be gone was like very new to me, and I didn't always know what to do with that. And I was also being diagnosed with bipolar, and it was just a lot of stuff that was a little bit outside of my control. So I was kind of tested first, and then our relationship, I think because it was me being so grateful for him, which is something I've said before, that I didn't even bother trying to see things like, well, what's going to happen when I accidentally trip over one of the landmines from who and what he actually is? That sounds kind of ominous, but all of us, we all have our triggers, and I think this isn't math, it's not science, but I think that it can take about a year and a half to actually run into like a significant trigger. You can definitely know you love someone very quickly. I knew I loved Mr. Blake really quickly. It's more a matter of you don't actually see the underlying layers of damage to them until some time has passed. It's not that things get worse when you move out of the honeymoon phase. It's that you open your eyes after the honeymoon phase and you are more aware of what kind of life you probably have to build together at that point. That's kind of the time when you figure out your strengths, and it's like, do I have the energy to carry this other person's insecurities along with mine? Maybe that was just my experience, but yeah, I think that was what I definitely learned, was kind of coming to terms with, I've been able to sort of look underneath the layers of him now. I have kind of gotten to see something that is more complicated about him, and I can see that it's going to be work, because relationships are work, because you really are you're definitely fixing each other's damage. So that does take work, and that's why it can feel less like a honeymoon, because you're like, aha, I found damage. What do I do now? But how do you know they're the one? I think that someone being the one is based on a lot of choice. It's that I wake up, he's here, I love him, I choose to love him. Tomorrow I'll wake up, I love him then. And all of this is part of a constant, consistent choice. I didn't marry him and say, you're it, you're done, we never work on this again. I married him and said, every day I will show you how loved you are. And that was actually in my vows, as I said, every day you will know you are loved. And for me, that is the definition of the one. You are the one I'm gonna spend my life on. I don't know if that helps, but I hope it does. Whew, so these next two questions are kind of related to each other. I'm going to start with this one. Olivie, how many tries do you give something before you give up? This is a sad question, especially because writing is like, you're failing until you succeed, right? I mean, I can write as much as I want, and until a publisher is like, yes, you have value, I'm not succeeding. I mean, that's not even to complain. That's kind of a fact. That's what the metric is. If you don't have a publisher, you don't have however many self-published sales, then you're not technically succeeding, right? So am I currently a failing writer? I guess. I don't really think about it that way. And this is relating more to the next question, which is basically the same question, but about writing. In terms of how many tries before you give up, if you're already counting, you're kind of already losing. One of the most impactful speeches that I've ever heard was Arnold Schwarzenegger at a commencement address, not mine, I just happened to be there. He talked, at that point, he had been a very successful actor, governor of California, and he obviously had his bodybuilding career, which is what he eventually, what he initially got famous for. That's what got him out of Austria. And to my surprise, he spent the entire speech talking about his bodybuilding career. I really think that was his first love, that's his true love, and that's what he wanted to talk about. It's the thing he was proudest of. And a couple things that he said have always stuck with me. One, a little bit unhealthy, but I am a little bit unhealthy too, so it speaks to me, is he said, any minute that you're resting or relaxing, someone else is working hard. That infected me, that concept. Every time I'm sitting there and not getting work done, I think about all the people who are working and how anyone who is working at that moment probably will deserve it more than me in the end. And I'm like, nope, I'm going to cross the finish line. And that's how I motivate myself. Obviously, we all have to take breaks. This is something I've said many times. The idea of how do you motivate yourself when you're procrastinating for no reason. The idea that how can you possibly deserve this most if you're not the one who worked the hardest for it? Something I tell myself a lot is that if I succeed, it will not be by accident. It won't be because I got lucky. It will be because at every moment that I could, I was working as hard as I possibly could. I was getting better as much as I could. I was taking every step I could in the direction of my goals. I don't want it to be, oh yeah, and then like I stumbled on this. No, it's going to be I clawed for this on my hands and knees. This is not an accident. Anyway, so that was just a whole other thought. Another thing that he said was that people often ask him how many sit-ups he does. And that his answer to this was, I don't know. I don't count my sit-ups until they hurt. And this is kind of obscure and it's a little bit metaphorical, but that's kind of how I want you to think about this is, how many tries before you give up? I don't know. I don't count my sit-ups until it hurts. I don't start thinking about how many, how long I'm going to give something before I quit when I've just started. I like to have a plan B. I like to know what I'm going to do that's going to still get me in the direction of a goal. I know when to stop and consider, do I really want what I'm doing this badly? Is it causing me to make unhealthy choices? Is it causing me to waste my time to hurt or harm others? That's when you quit, maybe. But I don't, without knowing exactly what you're talking about, it's not a question I like. It kind of gives me a weird, like, repulsive feeling. And it's not something I like to think about, even though every now and then something sneaks into my brain and is like, hey, what are you doing? Should you maybe get a real job? And the fact of the matter, and of course I'm using myself as an example because I don't know what you're referring to, is that I chose this on purpose. I think that this is the thing that I can do. This is the best thing that I know how to do. It is the best way I know to bring some good into the world and some use into the world. It is the thing that, from a utilitarian standpoint, this is the height of my value. And now I'm kind of transitioning into the next question. So actually, let's just skip to the next question. How on earth, having written and published so many stories, have you found the guts to not give up? Because I feel like a complete mumbling excuse of a so-called attempt at being a writer, and though my imagination never seems to fall short, my vocabulary seems to be one of a spoon, same as Ron. So please tell, where do I find the inner force to praise myself and keep writing even in the darkest of times? So this is from a much longer and very specific story about someone who's writing in not their native language, but the concept stands. And especially when it comes to writing, this is a very valid, upsettingly valid question. Like I said, it does appear like I'm failing by the metric that is already set up for me. And how do I write through this concept? How do I keep working through this concept of failure? I don't know what's going to motivate you. I don't know why you write, why you do this, why it's worth the work for you. But I can tell you why it's worth it for me. So my grandpa, I guess he's technically my step-grandpa. He's my mom's stepdad, is an immigrant from the northern rural part of the Philippines. So he doesn't speak English all that well. But I actually think he speaks very good English. He was in the U.S. Navy for his entire career, and I think he speaks English very well. But when I was a teenager, he told me that he wanted me to be a writer. He was the only person in my life who told me I should be a writer. Everyone else told me I should be a lawyer. And my grandpa told me I should be a writer, and he said that it was a gift, that I had a gift for taking the thoughts and feelings that other people have that they don't know how to express and putting them into words. So for my grandpa, who is constantly, translating his thoughts into English and never really sure that he's accomplishing his meaning, he has a lot of insecurity about communicating. And so he made it adamantly clear to me that what I could do was a blessing, I guess you could say. And I am reminded of that. I wouldn't say very often, but every now and then I get a reminder of that. Every now and then I get a review of something where someone's like, I have always felt this, or this resonates with me extremely strongly, and I've never known how to put it into words, and you put it into words for me. That is why I write. That right there. I don't know what that means in terms of what my actual skill is. I don't know what that means in terms of how long do I keep trying to do this. What I do know is I understand in an abstract way that what I can do with language and the stories that I can tell are to some degree a rarity. That is, like I said, that's the highest service that I can do for the world, is I can put someone's story in some abstract emotional way into words, and I can make people understand a new experience or understand their own experience. And I can do that by making up worlds and characters, and on some level that feels maybe trivial, but it also feels like the most important thing that I can do. I don't actually know how good I am at this. I can feel myself get better. I can feel myself when something clicks and I'm like, I think I've said something important. I think I've said something valuable. I know that feeling. I don't know if I'm ever going to succeed, but I do know that I've chosen this because it matters to me, and I just have to keep taking that somewhere. And a lot of times the direction I take it in, I understand that direction is going to change. I've already mentioned before that, I've gotten a lot more interested in feminism in literature, in erotica in literature, in sex positivity, and all this stuff has been a result of writing. I write for a predominantly female, sex positive audience, which has changed the way that I think, and it's changed the voices that I want to write and the stories that I want to tell. And obviously I have to adjust with those things, because the more important this is to me, and the more clearly I can see that there is a way to do this, there is a career where I can talk about the things I believe in and but hopefully convince other people that what I'm saying and these voices I'm representing are important. That's why I keep doing this. That's why I keep working. I guess you just have to remember why you write, why it's a goal. Every day you have to improve, right? Every day you work hard, especially if you're writing in not your native language. You don't ever, and the thing is, I'm never going to perfect English. I'm never going to be, and it's my only language. You don't really ever master this craft because it is a lifelong study. It is at the very least, a career-long endeavor. This is a craft. It is a pursuit. It's a journey. I don't think I will ever arrive at success. I think I will be failing for most of my career on the metric that is provided to me. I don't know what it even takes. Like, at what point are you like, okay, you're a success now, you're a successful writer? I don't think that point ever arrives, because even then you can still keep going, you can still be better, you can still do more, represent more. You can make the argument that J.K. Rowling is a successful writer, but I would also make the argument that she has quite a lot to learn, that she hasn't really been putting a lot of effort into lately. So yeah, how do you get through it? You get through it. And that's the thing, is it's the people who succeed are the ones who keep going. So you keep going, whatever that takes. Oh, I can see the light, like the light is like right in my face. Okay, I gotta end this. All right, well, sun's out. This has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing, and I'll see you next week.